We are live on YouTube for day 2. Here we go. And Connor, stand by in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. YouTube for day 2. Go. Here we go.
Media is an essential part of today's world. At the University of Illinois College of Media, our students are curious and creative, innovative and engaged, and they're charting a bold new course. Working with our esteemed faculty, students learn how to ask insightful questions, gather and analyze evidence, and tell a compelling story through words, images, and data. The College of Media at Illinois is an exciting and collaborative place to be. Students run news broadcasts and publish articles, shoot and edit cinematic videos and documentaries, and premiere them at our film festival, create strategic advertising campaigns for real-world clients, design virtual reality apps, and contribute to cutting-edge research. Through experiential learning, our students develop the diverse set of skills necessary to navigate the ever-changing media landscape. The College of Media prepares the next generation of leaders who will shape our fields and industries for decades to come.
Maddie and I, we've both been able to do so much with GMI, and really the only jobs we haven't been able to do have been the ones that each other's had.
That's true. Yeah, I haven't gotten to direct, and you haven't gotten to executive produce. Between the two of us, we've had every job on GMI. I think my favorite, besides being EP, is definitely doing tag-along with Sammy St. Ledger, who is our special guest, also our co-producer. Sammy, how you doing?
Hello, I'm good.
Thanks so much for being here. We miss you too.
Yeah.
Maddie, why did you decide to start coming to GMI?
I was in the dining hall. I was at late night, if you know what that is. And Maddie Foster interviewed me to talk about net neutrality. And she was like, oh, if you're interested in being on TV or working on a TV show, come to this general meeting tomorrow at this place that you've never heard of that is at the very edge of campus. I just got on a bus and showed up at Richmond and was like, I want to be a part of this.
No way, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did not know that story.
I remember walking in and just that awkward, there's a ton of seniors. I'm like, oh, who do I talk to? And I just look and Maddie's right there. And I was like, I looked at her phone and I was like, I like your Hufflepuff pop socket. And I believe that's began the friendship.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about the Hufflepuff pop socket conversation. And Dan came into the picture once the class started, right?
I knew of Maddie, and Mariah was in that class too. I knew Mariah, and other than that, I really didn't know anyone else in the class. So I was like, oh, maybe I can, talk to Maddie about GMI since I've never really done anything with it before. When I started with it, I never thought that I would be this involved with it, and it's just turned into something that I really care about, I feel like, and you guys have been such a huge part of that, so thank you.
We were all very good friends and spent too much time laughing, and I think that really made it so special that we got to do it all together.
We've had such great times, and it's sad that we're leaving you, Sammy, but I think we're leaving the show in really great hands with all the new anchors and all the new producers, and Connor taking over as EP. We'll be watching. That's all I have to say.
Hey, good afternoon to everybody. I'm John Paul, moderator of the sessions today. We've got two sessions today, one here at 1 o'clock Central, focusing on print and digital news, and another one at 2 o'clock Central, focusing on television news. I'm pleased to be joined by five panelists today, all of them University of Illinois alums, who will share their expertise with our class of 2020 and recent graduates who may want to know how to navigate this ever-changing, especially ever-changing in the last few weeks, job market, career. Some students are thinking about, how do I get a job amid situations out there? Do I go to grad school? What do I do? How do I make myself look better? You're going to help them do that today. The panelists will. And if you are watching either through Zoom or on YouTube today, make sure you can click on either the chat or Q&A to ask a question. If you're on YouTube, you can use the chat function and we'll get your question, because we want to answer your questions. So our goal today is to help those students, current students about to walk out the door with a diploma, which, help me, graduates, you don't get till about July, is that right? Did you get your degree in July? Don't forget to unmute at some point
That
here.
sounds about right. Yeah, July.
Yeah. Yeah, they want to make sure you pay all of your bills before you get your diploma. So a couple of remarks I just want to share. I think the class of 2020 probably is having the most challenging, unusual semester that any University of Illinois student has had since the place was founded in 1867. Not only this online learning thing, for those of you who are sporty, we had a basketball team that should have gone to a tournament that didn't get to go. We had a football team last fall, the class of 2020, had a football team that actually went to a bowl game, but still can't figure out how to win one and bring it back. They missed Mom's weekend, marathons, all kinds of things. They did have unofficial, for whatever that's worth. But yeah, they're being cheated out of many things, and they won't have commencement either unless they figure out a way to get together virtually. So again, we're trying to help them today, and your expertise can help them do that. Let me introduce our panelists today, and I'm going to have them talk a little bit about what they did in school that helped them get to where they are today. Did you do Daily Illini, radio? Did you do Good Morning Illini? What activities did you do related to media that helped you get there? I'm going to start with Peter Bailey Wells, who's at the Boston Globe. And Peter, your current position is a digital, you do multimedia, is that correct?
Yeah, what I do at the Globe right now is I'm a multi-platform editor, which is, it sort of translates to playing Mr. Fix-It or Mrs. Fix-It or the Fix-It person, whoever you are. It's very, depending on the day, different duty, different responsibilities. Copy editing, print layout, digital layout, graphics, a little bit of reporting in a pinch. So it's very multifaceted, yeah.
And you were in Boston yourself, right? Today?
I am. I live in Cambridge. I'm in my apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I grew up in the suburbs around here before
So the
going to
Red
U of I.
Red Sox and Patriots are a pretty big deal.
Yes, they are a big deal. Everything in Boston's being canceled, just like everything else. About an hour ago, they canceled the 4th of July fireworks here. So that's the
Peter,
latest.
tell us about your days as a student, so students watching you now can relate to, some students think their activities at the DI or PGU are just activities, that they won't mean much to their career. Can you address that?
Yeah, that certainly, I think, is the foundation of everything that I have gotten to do as a professional. Those student activities, I was at the DI for 3 years. I worked with Alex while I was there a little bit. I followed in the footsteps of Jamal, who was sort of there just before I was. Beyond that, I spent a year with Ken and JP in Richmond as a broadcast student. And I, did various other sort of freelancing things, the totality of which is sort of completely the foundation for what I do now. I think in a lot of ways, because this is so experiential and you have to really be doing stuff, you have to just go out and break a lot of eggs. And then you'll find a little bit down the road, you'll go, oh yeah, remember when we did that thing? Remember when we tried to design that absurd newspaper page? Well, actually, when you get to the pros, they're doing the same kind of things, just with more experience, with more skill, sometimes with better tools. But you'll find that your ability to contribute is directly dictated to simply like, how many times have you had these experiences? Because the processes are not immensely different. The skill level can be different, again, the tools, but you build a foundation in terms of your practice by doing student media. I mean, and not to mention the fact that sometimes, at least I know this was the case with us, you stumble into good work, or you almost accidentally do something that winds up being productive along the way.
Sure. Let's check in with Jamal Collier, often called Jamal of America, right?
Not that often anymore, but yeah, it's an old nickname.
Jamal recently made the move from MLB.com covering the Nationals in Washington, D.C. to his hometown of Chicagoland to work as a sports reporter at the Tribune. So first of all, Jamal, explain what you currently do, and then give us a glimpse of what you did in college that got you ready for your career.
Yeah, hey y'all. As you said, I cover the Tribune. Work at the Tribune now. I cover the Bulls for the Trib, and I just moved here in January. So really only had 2 months on this beat before the world shut down, and kind of had to sort of adjust from there. But I was at MLB.com for about 5.5 years. Before that, I was covering some general assignment stuff. I was covering the Washington Nationals for the past 4 years, up and through the World Series, which was fun. And in school, as Peter kind of said, I did all the student media stuff. I really kind of did everything I get my hands on. I was at BI for 3 years, covering news and sports, covered Illinois football and basketball, and baseball, and sort of did some things on news and champagne stuff. And I think that, I was a broadcast major as well, actually, in school, and did a couple of stuff with PGU, did a sports show with used to call it Illini Drive. I'm not sure if it's still around anymore, and did a couple different things and some radio news segments. So really for me, I was trying to get my hands on everything, just do everything I can get my hands on and see, one, what kind of stuff that I like doing. Between some television broadcasts we did some radio broadcasts. I was in JP's TV class, and I did some classes with some stuff with Ken as well. Did a bunch of the writing, and I think the biggest thing that I probably want to leave with you all listening for this, and obviously I think most of you guys are graduating or not now, but just to start doing things, like if you're interested in it, to just go out and do it. That's one of the benefits of being in this industry in this kind of period of time, doing journalism in 2020, is that you sort of have the luxury that if you want to write about sports, you can just sort of start writing it. You can get a blog, you can find a place online, you can make videos, you can do whatever it is, and just start doing whatever the thing is that you want to do. And nobody will read it now, nobody will really care, but one, it'll give you reps to start kind of building and figuring out exactly what you want to do. And then, if it is any good in the future, it can always be a thing that when you're applying for internships and jobs and such, as all that, you want something that you can hold and show somebody and say, look what I can do. So that was the biggest thing for me, I think, in school, is that I was trying out a bunch of different stuff. One, to see what kind of stuff that I like, and what kind of stuff that I want to do in my career. And also it really benefited me, I think, having experience on beats covering, relatively college sports or smaller activities. So then when all of a sudden I said, hey, I want to be able to cover the Bulls or cover the Nationals or wherever it was, I had experience doing it on a beat before, and somebody gave me a shot.
Thank you, Jamal. Let's move on to Jeffrey Katz. Jeffrey's joining us today from Washington, D.C. He is the news director at WAMU, the NPR affiliate. Is that correct, Jeffrey?
That's correct. The NPR news station in Washington.
So give us some background of what you currently do, what kind of staff you work with, and then, of course, what you did in school when you were at Illinois that propelled you in the path you took. And if I remember right, last time I met with you, you were at NPR itself, the headquarters, but you also worked at National Geographic and several other places in the DC area. So help students understand a little bit about Jeffrey's path to where you are.
Well, you got it all right. It all started at the Daily Illini. I got to campus on a Sunday, and Monday I was at Illini Hall saying, "I'm here for 4 years. Put me to work." And I covered meetings. I had a column. By the time I ended, I did everything I could, and I echo the other speakers in saying a lot of it is getting all the experiences that you can. I was also a member, the charter member of the Orange Crush, and if I moved my camera up a little bit, you'd see Dee Brown welcoming you all into my home office here. I spent 10 years in newspapers as a newspaper reporter, 10 in magazines. I did go to NPR for 15 years, first on the radio side, primarily as an editor at Morning Edition, National Geographic for a year and a half. And for the last 3 years, I've been the news director at WAMU, the NPR news station in Washington. Our newsroom, depending on how you count it, has 20, 30 some people. And one of the things that I would say is, particularly in this day and age, is to really absorb all kinds of media and different roles. I've gone from a monthly to a weekly to a daily. I felt like when I ran the news side of NPR.org, I was running a minutely, a reporter, an editor, a manager. There's something to say about getting these experiences and not just, and being able to show your work as you go along. So I'm pleased to reconnect with my fellow Illini here, including my friend and former colleague, Whitney. So it's good to see all of you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think one thing that all of us can say with certainty is that this news world, the journalism world, isn't as big sometimes as students think it is. There are connections upon connections, not only U of I connections, but people know people who know people. And you don't want to burn bridges as you move through your career. Alex Ortiz is up next. He is at the Herald News in Joliet, Illinois. And Alex, tell us a little bit about what you do on a daily basis, and then again, your U of I experience and how it started you down the career path.
Sure, and thank you guys for holding this. It's really awesome. So I'm basically the one general assignment reporter, I guess, at our newspaper. I cover basically news, and I tell people everything from school board meetings to shootings and everything in between. So, it's kind of a little bit of everything each day. I don't really know exactly what it is I'll be doing, when I start my day. And obviously this past, couple months have definitely proven true more than ever. And so, I do a little bit of politics, a little bit of county government, a little bit of school, a little bit of crime. So it's really just a plethora of things. And, when I have these experiences of feeling a lot of pressure to learn something on the fly and having to figure something out on deadline, I often think back to my experience at the U of I, whether it was, interning for the CBS affiliate down there covering, Friday Night Football, which is pressure because you need to hit that deadline. People want those highlights, and if you mess something up, if you misspell a name, people are going to tell you about it. So I always often think back to that type of experience and think, you know what, I was able to handle that. I can handle this, I think. But I did a lot of things like what Peter and Jamal were saying. I was also at the Daily Illini. I too was, first day I could sign up to try to be a sports reporter for the DI. It was like my dream coming in, and covered a little bit of women's golf, soccer, eventually a little bit of football and men's basketball, then transitioning from a print reporter to a videographer, which was something because I also took the standpoint of I need to try to do a little bit of everything. So I wrote a bit, did a little audio for WPGU, did some video, and that type of experience was super foundational to what I do now because, now as we're in this digital world and we can't really, be with people physically, my editor today even said, hey, can you do some video for us? You were a broadcast major, right? Which I was, and that's what I said, great, yep, I can do that. So being able to do all those different types of things has come in great handy for me now, even as a quote unquote print reporter. It is very much digital these days because I think we're getting further and further away from the days where we're principally thinking about a physical paper. That's just not exactly, it's obviously been this case for a while. That's just not what the industry is these days. So those type of experiences, I also interned at what was then called Illini Productions with the athletic department. having to learn how to, again, talk about pressure, having to learn how to, properly fold long cables during an Illini football game was pressure. Thousands of people watching you, making sure you didn't screw up. So a little bit of that, like I said, intern at Channel 3 down there in Champaign, which was great. And, talking about connections, I also interned at the Northwest Herald Sports Department, just covering high school sports. And the sports editor who was there at the time then got the job over at the Joliet Herald News, which is essentially my hometown paper. And, he called me up and said, hey, when I was graduating from grad school, said, hey, we have an opening. Would you be interested in coming in to talk? And I said, yep. So that was just kind of fortuitous, and just so happened that I interned for him, and I was super lucky in that regard. So those types of connections, when they say like, talk to people, don't burn bridges, make those relationships, it absolutely is true, because that's how I am. I'm gainfully employed now. So that's obviously the goal for everybody here.
Right. Let's move to our final panelist, Whitney Wyckoff. She is one of the editors at U.S. News and World Report, also in Washington, D.C. Whitney, tell us a little bit about what you do now, and again, your career path, what you did in college that you think helped propel you to where you are.
Sure. So I'm the senior editor of Advice Products here at US News, and I manage a team of 5 editors, and we are responsible for editing the content with all of our better known lists. So best colleges, best credit cards, best stocks, best diets. And so my team does a lot of project management, also hiring of freelancers when we need new content. So that's sort of what we do. And I've been at US News for about 3 years now. In terms of what I did at U of I worked at the Daily Illini, but Alex, who spoke before me, talked about his internships. I would really emphasize that the DI is a great place to learn skills, get that practice in, learn how to write a news story, learn about inverted pyramid. But I would encourage folks to think about their experience in student media as a way to get internships and not so much to get jobs, because you really do need those internships to be competitive in the workforce. And I would think that would be even more true today than it was when I graduated in 2009, which was also a difficult time, but not nearly as difficult as it is right now. But after I graduated, I think with 9 internships. My last, I got my big break from Jeffrey, actually, who hired me to intern at NPR. And I also worked there as a temp for about 2 years. After that, I worked at some trade publications and B2B media for a long time, or not a long time, but several years. And then I ended up at US News and World Report.
While we're waiting for students and others who are online or on Zoom or watching on YouTube to ask some questions, and I encourage you to do that, by the way, let me ask a general question. How do you view the state of the job market today for new college graduates? What would you tell them? Is it as bad as I seem to see at some newspaper chains? Is it going to get better? Is there anything they can do to make themselves stand out? I'll just open that to the entire crew.
I think I'm going to abstain from using a word to describe the job market, because it's tough and I don't want to sugarcoat that. And yet, one of the things that I most admire from some of the folks who came after me and some of the generations is it really puts a premium on people who are entrepreneurial, there was a time at which you got to one place and you stuck with it and they stuck with you. And I think through social media, through opportunities that you have to get yourself known, it really puts a premium on the self-starters. And I would also say 2 somewhat contradictory bits of advice. One is, I think it's really helpful to be a generalist, to know a little bit about a lot of different things. So as Alex says, you can, call upon different skills along the way, and you're never intimidated regardless of the assignment you're getting. But then secondly is to be able to drill deep down on some area. Is it technology? Is it business? Lord knows if it's health, a lot of places are going to come calling right now. So I think to be a generalist, but also have an area or two where you can distinguish yourself from everybody else.
Okay, anybody else want to join in?
I would actually, obviously being in a newspaper, we've heard since, the previous economic downturn that newspapers have been on, very unstable ground economically speaking, and that is true. There's no way to sugarcoat that, as Jeffrey said. So, but what I've come to see at my publication is, we have really been trying to focus on digital subscriptions, and fortunately we were in a much better place this time around than we were maybe 10 years ago. But just as hopefully a positive, optimistic piece of data, we've continued to increase our digital subscription numbers because frankly, people still want the news. Like that's something that, especially now, people want good information that's accurate, that's relatable and relevant to their lives. And we've continued to hit the goals we've set this year, even as the economy kind of went in the tank. So has it also put some pause on things we've done or we've wanted to do this year? Yes, but people still want really good news. And I think that's pretty much not going to change regardless of how the economy is. But obviously, like I said, it's still tough, but if you can provide that for people, I think that'll be valuable.
Peter, from your perspective in Boston, is it a tough job market for new graduates?
Yeah, I mean, I think like both Alex and Jeffrey said correctly, there's no way to sugarcoat that it's tough in general. But I think one of the things, I mean, to echo what both of them said, if you can be a generalist and then get in the door and have one skill or one area of expertise that makes you indispensable, that's a really good way to go. And then somewhat to what Alex said, like at the Globe, and we're a regional paper, very much in the style of the Tribune, for those of you who are from Chicago. The Globe has not laid off any newsroom employees and has told us we don't plan to do that. We don't want to do it because we're seeing subscribers and we're seeing readers respond with, we want the news. How that translates to like young journalists in the job market, it's tough to draw a line A to B, but I think like if you plan to enter this field now, don't do it with despair because people are going to need news. People are going to need news for the next week. People are going to need news for the next 7 weeks. They're going to need news for the next 7 years. That's not going to change. Where it is, I think the idea, like Jeffrey was pointing out, of being entrepreneurial, like you may have to change jobs 3 or 4 times or 5 times or 8 times, but don't expect that just because you can't go to a name brand place that your parents are familiar with or your grandparents are familiar with, that really matters. Because frankly, and this is one of the beauties of the internet, obviously, is your stuff can be anywhere. And if it matters, it's going to get out and about. I mean, we've seen that on any number of stories, so I won't run them down. But, if you're doing good stuff, that's going to come through. Someone is going to be impacted by that. And if you can, assuming you're getting paid to do your work, the possibilities out there are pretty limitless.
Okay, we have a question from someone watching us online and on Zoom. Isaac, you're up next. Go ahead, ask your question.
Hey guys, I think my main question is like this media market's so saturated with so many different voices, so many different things going on, but how do you maybe find your voice in this? How do you find as a writer to make yourself different than some of these other people?
I'll jump in on that one. I think that is still the thing that I struggle with the most. Even being in the job market X amount of years, or being wherever I've been graduated now. But I think that the thing that I kind of always think about is you have to think about what things do you bring to the table? What kind of unique perspectives do you have? What are you thinking or saying that other people aren't, and trying to sort of be able to always add things to the conversation to push the story forward or whatever. I mean, there is a lot of people. I mean, I think one of the examples of that I'm kind of struggling with right now is The Last Dance, and the documentary that ESPN is having about the Chicago Bulls right now. Everybody on the entire internet is pretty much the only sports game in town right now, but everybody's sort of writing and producing videos and content, quote unquote, about this documentary, and I'm now the thousandth person on the internet trying to talk about this thing that I was only sort of, I was alive for, but only sort of conscious for. So, I mean, I think just trying to bring, to lean into your strengths, lean into what kind of things do you have to add, to add a voice to that is always my, I guess my thought process, the way I try to approach it, and think about, again, not trying to mirror other people, I think is a big thing. There are a lot of journalists that I respect and I like their work, and I probably take little things from a lot of different people that I enjoy, whether it be writing styles or things on whether they're media, just whatever it might be. But I think that just trying to find, and that comes with practice and time, and that's kind of one of the first point I had, is sort of why I think you just have to do it for a while, and until you really kind of figure out and exactly find where your niche is in everything. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing for me, especially like I said, coming to the Bulls beat. A lot of these people, a couple people that have been on the Bulls beat right now have been covering the team since literally Michael Jordan was playing. And I think that is, just a kind of a daunting task for me, is to say, all right, well, what do I have to say that's new or relevant, compared to these people who have been literally covering this team for almost as long as I've been alive. And, that's the thing that I think you're going to, I don't feel, some people are better at it than me, and they have found a quick fix and they kind of can figure out something that make the video and it goes great, it's great right away. But I think that's the thing that I am still constantly sort of struggling with and trying to be conscious of, to figure out how to fit in when there's just so much noise and content out there at all times.
All right, anybody want to chime in, or we've got another person who got a question? Go ahead, Peter.
I'll add something quick to Jamal. Don't be afraid to go long. I think like the internet dictates that, or our impression of the internet dictates that whatever you do has to be snappy and quick. But I'll tell you, both from speaking as a reader, but also speaking as like someone who has half an eyeball on our engagement numbers and our subscriber numbers and stuff like that, people like, the length is not an issue if what you're doing is good. Long form work is not any less certainly not any less valuable, but also not any less interesting to people when done well. So don't be afraid to go on. It takes practice. It takes a lot of pieces have to fall into place for a good long form story, but don't let the length deter you. Don't let this sort of lack of tweetability concern you, because it's definitely still really good work, and people still respond to that. Readers, listeners, watchers still respond to that stuff, as we're seeing with The Last Dance. Not a short thing. That's a lot of tape that they compiled. It's a lot of work that's going on there, but it's not any less interesting or appreciated.
I'll piggyback really quick off that, just to add that also try things, try new stuff. You just do it. And especially, again, when the stakes are low, maybe if your first job is not at a huge kind of market, or even in class and sort of internships and such, and at the Daily Illini or whatever, your student media. I think one of the things I used to love about the BI is that, we wrote times, and Peter and Alex, people wrote 10,000 word, 2-part, 8-part features or whatever, that we have no business at 20-year-old or whatever writing it, but we were the boss, so we made the rules, so we can do whatever we wanted. And I think that that's the kind of benefit of where you guys are now and where you guys were in school. And exactly, I don't know the ages range here, but just go out and do it and try it. And again, if it sucks, you learn from it and you figure it out later. But trying a lot of new stuff is also key to see exactly where your niche and your voice exactly is going to be.
Just making sure, but sucks is a journalism term?
I believe, yeah, it's a you don't grade people. That's not a term you get.
Whitney, go ahead.
So speaking as someone who hires a lot of freelancers, I would say that, it's really important to keep those basics in mind. So being accurate, hitting deadlines, adhering to the assignment that you're given, and being willing to take feedback and make adjustments based on what your editor wants. So, a lot of people are probably going to be thinking about trying to do some freelancing or stringing for their local paper as they're trying to search for a job, their first job. So if you're doing some freelance work, I would say it's less about finding your voice and more about developing a good relationship with your editor and developing a reputation as someone who's reliable and accurate.
Gavin, you're up next. Gavin, you have a question, and I think it's about freelancing. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody. It's funny that Whitney just mentioned that, because, yeah, that was what my question was about. I've been freelancing, I guess you could say, or like stringing for the Peoria Journal Star and the Springfield newspaper about Illinois since the fall. And I am like wondering how viable of a way it is to continue to do that and kind of try to build it into getting in the door at, you know, some of publications like you guys, or, you know, just kind of like taking the next steps for further down the road and bigger publications and whatnot. And what I really like want to know is how do you go about pitching stories in yourself as a freelancer, especially right now when, like, you know, budgets are continuing to be low and there's a lot of like uncertainty in general.
That's a really good question. I know at US News that our freelance budget has been cut significantly as a result of everything that's going on. So freelancing, at least at US News, and I would assume that would be true elsewhere, is going to be a lot more competitive. But I guess just speaking as someone who has done some freelancing, I would say that I did see success pitching just cold pitching editors ideas that I had. You would need research to back it up. You might have to refer to other things that they've covered, but I did see some success there. But in terms of being a full-time freelancer, that's really hard. And I wouldn't rely on that when you're coming right out of school. People who do that have a lot of, they probably have worked in the industry for a while. They have a lot of connections. They might have some corporate clients that they use. And, you know, the corporate clients are going to pay a lot more competitively than a lot of the journalism clients. So I wouldn't rely on that if that's what you're planning after graduation. Think of it as more of a supplement to your income. And maybe you have to take a job that's sort of outside of the industry as you build your portfolio.
Want to jump in at all, Jeffrey? Any ideas along those lines about freelancing?
No, I'm gearing up for the next question about fake news.
Okay, well, that'll be coming soon. I do have one that was texted to me by somebody watching on the YouTube channel or YouTube. People have mentioned it's good to be entrepreneurial. And she asked, what examples of do they have of ways to do that? What do you mean by that? And what are some examples?
Well, I'll give you one example of somebody I hired many years ago. It was for a web producer position at NPR. And I asked some variation of a question of essentially, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be a producer? Do you want to be an editor? Do you want to be a reporter? And I still remember the answer she gave me, which is, I don't understand the question. I'll do whatever it takes to tell the story. If I need to write it, I'll write it. If I need to edit somebody, I'll do that. I'll produce it for on air or on the web. I hired her. She eventually left NPR. She's now has been working at the New York Times for a good number of years. But that's the kind of attitude that as much as anything else, you want to tell the story and you want to find the right way to tell the story. And you also, as I constantly go back and forth between broadcast audio and also the digital side, you also begin to understand that you want to tell the story the best way possible for the medium that you're working in. And that means you tell it different ways.
All right. A question from Connor. Connor, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, hey guys. So obviously over the past few years, the term fake news has really become a big thing in the conversation, and a lot of people accuse certain news outlets of having bias or just trying to tear down certain parties. What do you do to combat that in your day-to-day jobs?
I mean, I could definitely take that. I will say I am still trying to figure that out, how to do it just right. And it's hard. I mean, literally just the other day, I wrote a story about how, you know, the local county government here is going to lose a bunch of money because of this crisis. And I got an email from somebody, some random person who said, you know, oh, who paid you to write that story? It was so biased or whatever. And besides my employer, I thought, I haven't seen any money that someone else has paid me. I don't know. You know, I thought it was a pretty objective story. I had, you know, people from both parties talk, and it was fairly straightforward, simple story. But that's going to happen. And, what I've learned, and I'm sure you guys have heard from, your professors, that this industry is all about relationships and it's all about people. And, 90% of the time when I get an email like that or somebody confronts me about something, if you just treat them like a nice human being that you are, they're usually going to be understandable, and they'll, try to hear you out, and maybe they'll learn something. So it's really hard. You just got to be accurate, I think, is probably the big thing. If you're accurate, it's kind of hard to argue that you're biased. But, and even if there is some fair critique there, there's a word here that may not be all that fair, or maybe slightly, people may take exception with. Listen, try to take that into consideration next time you're writing a story.
I know I used to tell those of you who were my broadcast students, you have to have thick skin to work in this industry. Do you think that's even more so the case now with the angry environment that seems to be out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've gotten a lot of very interesting emails, not too many, but some very, very hateful. And it's just, after a while, although honestly, after a while, I thought it would kind of affect me, but after like the 10th one, it's like, I just kind of rolls off my shoulder. It doesn't matter anymore.
Well, I was going to say something about having a thick skin too, and I want to provide a defense of mainstream media. As I look out on our panelists here, how much easier it would be in this day and age to be able to go with one side or another ideologically and feel secure that that the opinion you have is right, and to have an entire worldview. And I have spent 4 decades now in mainstream news organizations, seeing things in shades of gray, being proudly unaffiliated. It doesn't mean that I'm fully objective. It doesn't mean that I don't have opinions, but it does mean I come across every story with a big sense of humility. And I also like making people give their best arguments. So here's to being accused of fake news from lots of different directions, and having a thick skin.
Another question from a student, Avery. Go ahead and ask your question. Don't forget to unmute your mic.
Better? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
We hear you now.
Okay. So my question is that a lot of people have been telling me around school that the print side of the industry is shrinking. So I was curious as to what you guys thought. Is the print side of the industry shrinking in favor of more digital platforms, or is the digital being used to supplement the print?
Okay, thank you, Avery. I will comment real quickly. We had a question yesterday. Somebody said, my dad told me, get out of this journalism thing. It's a dead industry. It's a dead career, which kind of builds on what Avery asked. So Jamal, you want to try that one?
Yeah, I'm the one who just signed up and hopped onto a newspaper. So I think I'm perfect for that. I think I have a lot of thoughts on that. But the first is that, yes, on one hand, I mean, how often do you read your news from a physical newspaper or from a magazine or whatever? I think that I read mostly on my phone, on my iPad, from Twitter, from other apps and such. So I think, is the print media shrinking and changing or whatever? Absolutely. I think that that's just sort of how we get our news now. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think even at the Tribune, the paper is sort of, at least for us in sports, and I don't know how exactly the rest of the newsroom, but the paper is sort of a secondary thing for us. And I think, somebody said this earlier, worry about telling the story. I think it's sort of how you should be thinking about it, whether you're thinking about writing it, thinking about producing it in some kind of audio form or some kind of broadcasted video or whatever. And I think that is what I would say to focus on a little bit more as you're looking into the job market, as you're going into your career and such, is to worry about how to present a story and how to tell stories, because there is an appetite for news, there's an appetite for stories, there's going to be always some kind of medium for that. And it's changing. It's not necessarily on a physical newspaper anymore. And I think the smartest news organizations are sort of have already and are still sort of finding ways to monetize and ways to change their kind of business model from focusing on a physical newspaper that, you know, again, even as somebody who works at that, we get delivered to my home, so I read it, you know, probably every day with that. But other than that, I don't read physical newspaper every day. And I think that is the thing that I would focus on a little bit more, as opposed to what exactly if the actual print product is dying or changing or whatever. You know, we're about people are going to want stories, and you know, that's kind of what your job is here, is to be able to get people information and give people stories, and whatever the kind of the best way.
Peter, this is your everyday job, this digital part of this, the question that Avery had. You agree that maybe the print side is shrinking a bit in favor of online, or should we just tell stories the best way we should tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with Jamal. You know, pick your medium, it doesn't matter, and tell the story that way. Yeah, the numbers dictate absolutely that print circulation is shrinking. We have more digital only subscribers than we have print only subscribers at the Globe now. It's been that way since 2018. But I think, like, just keep in mind if your dad is saying that journalism is dying, don't confuse the number of printing presses that are running with the industry. The Chicago Tribune or the Boston Globe may have been founded as a newspaper, but that's not what it is now. It's a news organization, and that doesn't change its ability. It doesn't change its prominence. It simply changes whether or not you're reading it on a piece of paper or on a screen. So just be careful. And if someone says something like that to you, you can make that distinction if you want. But at least in terms of how you're thinking about it in your career, those of you who are entering the industry now, you know, it's really, really helpful for you to be able to be conversant in the internet, right? That means knowing what's going on in social media. That means, for those of you who are inclined, knowing how to code. If you take a class, there are free classes. Listen, we're all at home. There are free classes galore. JavaScript, Python. These are not things that I've necessarily learned myself, but my sister is your age, and she's going to graduate in December. And is hoping to get into a career in journalism. And she started taking, you know, the Knight Center, Poynter. These places will offer, go look for them. They'll offer free data journalism classes. Dig into that. That's the kind of stuff. If you want to position yourself as sort of forward thinking, and you know what, one of these newspapers, old school newspapers that is really a news organization, like the Boston Globe or the Chicago Tribune or the Post or the Times. I mean, you know, they're not going anywhere just because their original product was a newspaper. They may shrink, they may change, things may happen. There may be the ground may shift under their feet, but again, don't confuse the number of printing presses running with an industry's success. Although, of course, you know, there are certainly growing pains.
Hey, the bell's about to ring here for class, so we've only got a few minutes left, and we do have another question from Peyton. Peyton, you're a graduate student at the University of Illinois, but you have a question for our panelists. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Most importantly, I hope all is very well, and I appreciate you taking this moment to really kind of give us some advice as we enter the job market. I've noticed social media has become, I should say, really imperative in building a devoted readership and facilitating your work. How would you recommend managing social media and optimizing it to really accentuate your stories? Thank you so much.
Thanks. Go ahead. Social media to optimize your story. Whitney, you want to jump in on that?
Well, I would say that that's not something that we focus as much on at US News as other techniques to draw people in. But when it comes to applying for jobs, social media is something that you really need to think about. Your hiring manager that you're going to be interviewing with is 100% going to be checking your Instagram, your Twitter, and whatnot. And you would be shocked how many people get eliminated because of unsuitable things that we have found on social media. So as you're applying for jobs, keep that in mind. Keep your personal brand in mind so that when potential employers are looking you up, they're not seeing anything that you don't want them to.
And I would say one of the key things too is despite, beyond sort of the interest that we were talked about earlier in terms of long form journalism, can you say something in 140, 280 characters that really can make you stand out from the pack? Can you get a photo that will sort of lift above? And I really think there's a certain discipline to the idea of selling your story in social media that, as Whitney says, believe me, I'll check Twitter mostly of anybody who applies for us. And I'm looking to see, it's also a window on the world, not just the stories that you're doing, but what are you reading? What are you seeing in other places? And can you pick out an interesting point for that and make that hit home for what you're doing? That, I think, really helps you as a writer journalist.
All right, I'm going to wrap things up here and ask each of you, so get ready for this, for one tip that you'd share with this current class about to walk out they can't walk off the quad even these days, but about to walk out the doors of the U of I. If you have one tip for them in entering the job market or going to grad school, maybe for a master's degree, what's your one tip that can help them be successful? And let's start at the bottom. So let's start with Whitney. I got to unmute there.
I certainly wouldn't take on more debt to go to grad school in this job market. So if you're considering that, reconsider it. But beyond that, as you're applying for jobs, you might not be able to get the job that your dream job or the job that you think you deserve right now, because the job market is real rough. So keep that in mind. But as you're applying for jobs, look at places where you think, oh, you might have opportunities to build skills for that next job. Or, oh, if I take this job, I might have time to string for the local newspaper on the side. Think of it that way, because I looked at journalism jobs this morning and it looked pretty bleak. So keep that in mind. And also, something that people told me when I was in school, that if you go to PR, you can never go back to journalism. That has not been something that I have seen. There are people that I work with right now who came from PR or some sort of communications field where they were able to build those skills, those editing skills, those writing skills. They had work samples that they could show a potential employer, and they were able to make the switch back to journalism. So if that's where you can get a good job in public relations or communications, that might be something to consider, even if your dream is to work at the Trib.
Okay, Alex, you want to chime in with one brief? We're down to a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, I was going to say yes to, try to say yes to as much as you can within reason, of course, whether it's a job or a type of story that you never thought you would be covering ever. Like, I never thought I'd be kind of covering some of the things I've been covering. Just try to say yes, and who knows, maybe it'll be interesting and you'll learn something.
Jeffrey, you got a tip for them?
Well, I'm going to go back to a slightly earlier question about the state of journalism. I decided in the third grade I wanted to be a journalist. This is all I wanted to do. My parents told me, you'll never be rich. They were right. And yet somehow I've made a go of it for all these years. I also told my kids, do whatever you want. I'd be just as happy if you're not a journalist. The fact is, the experiences I've had, what I've gotten to do, the people I've been able to meet, the issues of the day that I've been able to get involved in. If this is what you want to do and you're passionate about it, do it. And I'll also echo what Whitney said. Even if journalism isn't quite right for you, my goodness, every business is now trying to operate directly to consumers, and those communication skills are going to serve you well wherever you go.
Great, good tips. Jamal.
Yeah, thank you all, first of all, for all the questions and stuff y'all had. I know JP or someone can leave my email or anything if you guys have more stuff you want to run by me or whatever. I know we spent a good portion of this hour talking about how difficult the market is and how tough it is to get in and break in. And I'm glad we sort of I don't want to undersell that to you guys. Like, it is definitely a changing industry, a difficult industry that it's got a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainties about it. And in the same thing, when I was in your position not too long ago as a senior as well, I got heard the same stuff about how difficult the market was and how you're going to have to start off or whatever, and just all the things that I'm sure the doom and gloom you guys have heard. But I want to really encourage you guys. It is, sort of cliche to say, you don't work a day in your life or whatever, but I have done a lot of things in this business between MLB.com and now that I only dreamed about and thought about as a student. And I, if you're really passionate about it and you're willing to put in the work, which I think, you have to put in the work. I mean, there are a lot of late hours for not a lot of money, for especially in speaking from the sports field. You're working late nights and weekends, and I had to move away from my family and had to do a lot of things that were maybe not ideal or not easy, but it's worth it. And I think that if you are willing to sort of put in the work to get it, there's just really not a more rewarding thing, not anything else that I would really want to do. So again, the only really advice I have for is kind of what I said earlier for you all. Just start going out there and try to create stuff and try to figure out exactly what you want to do. Again, I could kind of ramble on here for on and on. We're running out of time, but I do want to encourage you all. It's a dope business that, as annoying as the job market is, you can have a lot of fun with it.
Peter, going last can be good or difficult after everybody else has given tips. Do you have one?
That's all right. I'll be brief. Don't confuse other people's appearance of success in the job market with actual success. Forget it, whether it's in journalism or otherwise. Just because someone posts on Instagram that they've loved their new job and maybe you don't love yours, don't let that pressure you. And secondly, just be persistent. 40 hiring managers might say no, but you only need one to say yes. I still have a list of the places I applied to out of college, everywhere that said no. And it's more than 40 different spots that said no. And it's a little motivating, to be honest. So just keep that in mind. Only one yes is what you need.
Persistence. Great. Thank you so much. My humble thanks to all of you, Jeffrey, Peter, Alex, Whitney, and Jamal, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. And believe me, it's wisdom with the current class and with those who've only been out of school a couple of years. We appreciate it, and we'll be making your contact information available to them if they wish to reach out to you. Thanks again, and ILL.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Yellow.
I'm getting a crew together and I need producers. You in?
Yeah, I'm in.
100% I'm in.
Yeah, I'm in. One thing though, I'm already here.
Now we just need anchors.
But who?
We need TV experts.
I know just who to call.
Hello?
Hello?
What are you doing this fall?
Anchoring?
Good answer.
What's in it for me?
An opportunity.
Opportunity to what?
To tell stories that matter.
And if I say no?
You won't.
How do you know?
Because you picked up the phone.
Good morning, Illini.
Good morning, Illini. Today, we're heading to the zoo.
Hey, Ken, if you can hear me, can you walk me through how to roast?
Curator of Behavioral Husbandry at the Brookfield Zoo. Thanks for joining us today, Tim.
Good morning, Connor. It's great to be with you.
So, who's this guy that you've got over there on the climbing board?
Well, look at that. We've got a beautiful snake here. This is a ball python. Hope you can see him there. This animal is we're not really sure of his age. It was a confiscated animal. And so he came to us and we've been taking care of him for a couple years now.
So you said that this one was confiscated. Do people keep them as pets?
Yeah, this is an animal that's really pretty much all throughout the pet trade. Unfortunately, because of its beautiful coloration and its docile nature, it is always advertised as being a good pet. But taking care of reptiles like this that are very highly specialized and need a good diet are important, are hard to do, and so you need a lot of skill in which to do that.
So why are they called ball pythons?
That's a great question. So it comes back from a type of defensive mechanism they have. Whenever they feel threatened, they kind of tuck their head into the middle of their body and create a ball around it, like a protective ball. And that helps to protect them from any predator or threat that they have.
Now, is there anything that we can do to help these guys thrive and survive in the wild?
Yeah, we don't need leather boots made out of snake. I mean, really, it's not something that's really important. Likewise, like a lot of animals, they are affected by habitat encroachment and habitat loss. So again, be careful with the products that you buy and make sure that if they're farmed, that they're done in a way that is sustainable for the animals and wildlife around them.
All right. Well, thank you so much for teaching me a little bit about this ball python, Tim.
You're very welcome.
That's it from the Brookfield Zoo. I'm Connor Seco. Make it a good morning, Illini.
Hey there, good afternoon to everybody. It's the 2 o'clock session today for the Eye and Media Virtual Conference. Today we're talking about television news with alumna from St. Louis, Chicago, Milwaukee, and one non-alumna who's been graciously enough to join in. Again, the purpose of this session today is to give our 2020 graduates some insight into the job market, into things they can do that might make them be more appealing when they apply, into ways that, say, a recent graduate who's out in the market 2 or 3 years, maybe an MMJ, maybe an anchor, maybe doing weather, how they can make that next job jump. So that's our purpose today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Paul, a retired lecturer from the Department of Journalism for about 20 years. I had many of these people in class that you're going to see in a few minutes, our panelists. At one point, they were among my students. By the way, one of the people we have on our panel today has got a Dick Butkus jersey behind him, and so we're going to reward him with something today, maybe a beer at Murphy's or something like that for that. So
how about a blue guy?
Let me introduce our panelists today, and I'm going to ask you first if you can tell me what you currently do in your job at your position, and then briefly, what did you do in school to help you get to where you are today? What were vital things you picked up, not only in classes, maybe activities or other things that you did in school that helped you along the way? So I'm going to start with Samantha Chapman. Do you want to go by Samantha or Sam today?
We can go by Samantha. How are you doing, JP?
Good to see you. You were at ABC7 in Chicago. You've had a path that's taken you from the Quad to Chicago. Tell us what you do now at ABC7 in Chicago at WLS and what you did in school that helped you get there.
Absolutely. So I am the morning consumer reporter, but I'm also a part of the I-Team with the renowned Chuck Gowdy and Jason Knowles. So it's really amazing to be in their company. So I wear two hats. So on the morning show, the first part of my day, I'm doing sometimes fun consumer stories, ways to stretch your dollar. But then at times I, do the hard hitting investigative pieces. So I wear two hats. I love them both. And it's amazing to be home. I'm from Chicago. In terms of things that I did back in Champaign or in the beginning that helped me get to this point, I would say internships were huge. Every summer, every fall, I was a part of an internship. when my friends were out spring breaking, and no shade to anybody who does spring break, but my mom was very clear that I will not be funding any spring break trips. I will be funding bus fare for you to get to and from to be at your internship. So I'm really grateful to my mom for really making me focus during the summer times, because those internships really proved to be invaluable. So I would say the internships were huge.
Outside of classes, did you do Daily Illini? Did you do radio? Did you do any activities when you were in school?
Yeah, so my freshman year, I did radio. I was a part of the Daily Illini. Well, I was in their flyers department, so I was passing out flyers. But mainly, my freshman year, I did radio. I was a part of the National Association of Black Journalists, NABJ, which really allowed me to spread my wings and kind of learn from the older folks, because going in, I was one of the youngest members, very shy, wasn't sure, where I fit in, but they really helped guide me. And NABJ also allowed me to network, and really it allowed me to get some of the internships that I got here in Chicago. So yeah, I tried to stay active. I also joined a sorority, and they allowed me to do some TV news stuff with them as well. So we had a really good time in Champaign.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. Let's go to Laura Hediger. Laura is an anchor and morning show host for a Great Day St. Louis program in St. Louis. Laura, what'd you do in school that got you ready for a career in television? Because I think you started as a sports writer, is that right?
I did. I actually started pre-law, so that lasted a long time in Champaign. But my degree is in print journalism, and then I got a master's in broadcast journalism. I loved my time at the University of Illinois. I cheered there my freshman year before I was dropped at a basketball game and tore every ligament in my right knee. That ended my athletic career. So I decided to go ahead and be a sports reporter if I couldn't do sports anymore. And yes, cheerleading is a sport, so let's not even get started on that. About 3 weeks before my knee surgery, I hobbled into the Daily Illini office way before it was in its nice office there, right in the middle of campus town. It was really crummy where I went, and begged them to make me a sports reporter. I started off covering wheelchair basketball my freshman year, and then worked my way up to finally covering football my senior year. I was also in a sorority. I was in Kappa Alpha Theta. We go by Thetas. And I had 7 internships while I was in undergrad and then grad school. So very much like Samantha, I interned a lot of places. I had 2 internships in New York. I had an internship in Chicago, and then a few right there in Champaign, and then at the University of Illinois. So I feel like I have a pretty diverse background, and I really appreciate having that print background too, because it has really helped, I think, in at least my interviewing techniques as I have grown in my career.
And Laura, you started in Charleston, South Carolina, correct? You're an Illinois girl, really small town Illinois girl, started in Charleston, South Carolina, so really pushed yourself. And now St. Louis, much closer to home.
Much closer to home. And the way I got my job is a little different than the way most people get their jobs. I finished my master's in December. I applied for sports jobs all over the country, did not hear back from one of them. So in February, in the middle of the book is what we call it, the ratings period, I decided to pack my car full of suits, resumes, and DVDs and showed up at 30 television stations across the Southeast, unannounced, no phone call ahead, no email, just showed up and asked if I could talk to them about a job. Showed up at the NBC affiliate in Charleston. They hired me pretty much on the spot. We had to work out a few other things, but I moved there. I was only there for 15 months, and then I got the opportunity at the CBS affiliate in St. Louis, which is my home TV market.
And right now you are a morning anchor and a host of what, a 9 a.m. show or 10 a.m. show?
9 to 10, and then we get to do a Facebook Live each day for about an hour that's called Great Day St. Louis, where we basically get to be cheerleaders for the city. So it fits my background pretty well.
And most importantly, you helped your elderly grandmother celebrate a birthday recently.
Yes. Mama is one of my very best friends. She turned 96 yesterday, and I talked about it on both of the shows that I host and anchor. And they had a big birthday parade yesterday in my hometown and had over 60 people show up. It was really special.
I'm sure Grandma appreciated it.
I think she's a little tired today, but yes, had a lot of fun.
Let's move to the other Laura on the panel today. So I'll probably call you Laura H and Laura M today, but this is Laura McGolan, who is joining us from Packer country up in Milwaukee. Laura, tell us a little bit. You're not a University of Illinois graduate, but you know this guy named Ken Erdy somehow. So, and you probably worked with him at one point, took classes from him at one point. Tell us what you do now at WTMJ in Milwaukee, and a little bit about what you did in college that got you ready for what you do today.
Sure. So yeah, I went to Columbia and had Ken in the mid to late 2000s. He actually taught me how to edit, so that was pretty great. I'm an executive producer at TMJ4, and I am the executive producer for TMJ4 News Today. So I get to boss Pete around all morning because he works with us in the show. But my path, I guess, I kind of knew pretty early on in my college career that I did not want to be on camera. I thought I wanted to do sports, dabbled in it a little bit, taking some television classes, and that was not for me. I did not want to be the reporter that got the call after working on a story all day, being told by a producer that they have to change because there's breaking news. And I've always kind of been assertive, and I feel like that's kind of the personality you need to have if you're a producer. In college, I took advantage of internships. I interned at CBS 2 with Pam Zeckman in the investigative unit. By far, one of the best experiences of my life. I didn't just get to log. I got to go out on investigations with her. I got to watch her work. I got to see her interview technique, which also helps even if you're a producer, because oftentimes we have producers that do interviews and they write anchor packages that reporters can voice, and producers write for talent. So you need to have that skill as well, even though you're behind the scenes. I also took advantage at Columbia. We had 2 different television programs, Newsbeat and Metro Minutes. And I was able to get into Metro Minutes my sophomore year. And I was fortunate because I was basically the only person in either class that wanted to be a producer. So I got a lot of one-on-one attention from my professors, and they just kind of let me run wild. So I built that skill up in college, which really helped me to land my first job in Rockford. I would say networking in college is huge. The TV business is so small. I can't even tell you how many people I'm connected to. Marissa sent me a text this morning and told me that you're on this. I worked with Marissa in Rockford. She actually trained me, and Marissa works with Samantha at ABC7. Yeah, and I worked in Chicago as well before I decided to go the management route. I would just say you just have to be flexible and you have to be open. Don't pigeonhole yourself in, when you want to apply for a job, just I'm only going to apply in Chicago, or I'm only going to apply X. Like, be open. I was regional because I wanted to remain in the Midwest, but I feel like I'm fortunate because I'm a producer, and we are a rare breed in television news.
Now, having been a former anchor, reporter, producer, news director myself, I'm always told producers can advance faster than people who are on camera or MMJs. True, Laura, or not?
Absolutely. So a big reason why I went that route, I was in a class at Columbia, and our professor asked, raise your hand if you want to be a reporter. Everybody in the class raised their hand. Raise your hand if you want to be a producer. I'm the only one. And I'll never forget it. She pointed at me and she told me, you can write your own ticket because there are so few of you, and just look at the makeup in this class. I set a goal for myself that I wanted to be in Chicago by 26, and I had achieved that goal, which is pretty lofty, pretty hefty. And I worked on Good Day Chicago, and I mean, nobody could believe that I was 20. I was actually 25 when I got that position. No one could believe that I made the jump that quickly, and I had already been. That was my third market by 25.
People whose last names begin with Z are often last in everything. I don't want to stain you, Peter, but by the way, we really like the Butkus jersey behind you.
Thank you. I had to do that for this.
Pete, you, if I remember right, when you were in school, you wrote a fitness column for the Daily Illini. Did you do other activities in school? And the other is, you didn't start in Milwaukee. You started in a smaller market in Wisconsin, if I remember.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the adventure from whatever you did journalistically at Illinois to Milwaukee.
Well, so I started, actually my first job was, I was a freelancer for the News Gazette in Champaign, and they'd send me to cover high school football games. And then from there, since I kind of liked sports, worked at the Daily Illini, started covering baseball, and I was a sophomore, and it was supposed to be me and a senior named Wes, and he's a really nice guy, but he just told me, you know, it's my second semester senior year, so this is pretty much just going to be you covering baseball. Have fun. But I liked it, even though I wasn't really a huge baseball fan. And then covered football the next fall as a columnist. And then after that, got kind of burned out on sports, so that's why I did the fitness column you mentioned, JP. Did some other internships too. Had a digital internship in New York, which back then I was kind of bummed that I was working for the CBS website, but it's funny because now there's so much online stuff as part of our job that I think I use that internship probably more than anything else. I did an internship at a station in Champaign too, and then in Chicago. And then I had 2 interviews coming out of college, probably sent out like 50 reels. Ended up having 2 interviews, one in Tennessee that I didn't get, and then one in La Crosse, Wisconsin that I did get. And so that was my first job. And I never thought I'd still be up here almost 10 years later, but bounced from there to Madison and now to Milwaukee. So that's kind of my path so far.
And in all of this, you've maintained your Bears connection or not?
I was never really a fanatic Bears fan, but big Illini fan. And so, man, I can't tell you how satisfying it was to beat them, the Badgers, I mean, in football and basketball this year after just getting roasted up here every year since 2011. Like, I can't even describe the joy that brought me this year. So.
And then Pete brought us lamb, so it was a great day.
Okay, we've got
Yes, I promised that I would make roast lamb for the morning team if Illinois beat UW at football, and they did. So I brought the lamb in. I literally set my alarm at 11 p.m. to wake up and cook it, so it was fresh at 3:30 in the morning.
And if I remember right, that was the game where they kicked a field goal in the last seconds. Is that right?
How could we forget? Yes, that was it.
Let's go. Recent graduate. Go ahead, get a question.
Hello, can you guys? Sorry, it was lagging a little bit. Hey, I hope everyone's doing well, and thank you. My question is, I just graduated recently in December, and I've been trying to get a job without much success. But most of the postings I'm seeing are for jobs in TV and like broadcast, and most of my experience is in writing. And I'm down to do really any job, but I'm just wondering like, which positions in like the TV broadcast area might I have a better chance of being qualified for if most of my experience is in writing and like covering beats?
Anybody want to take that one on?
Yeah, I can actually take that on. So in my second job in Louisville, Kentucky, there were about 3 print writers who worked at, I want to say, was it the Courier Journal? I think that's the name, the Courier Journal in Louisville. And there were 3 print writers there, and they actually left together. They left Courier Journal to come on with WDRB News, the Fox affiliate in Louisville. And it was probably one of the smartest things that the station did. They brought in these print writers and they became digital writers for the station. And one of the cool things about these digital writers, they actually teamed up with the reporter. So if I was working on a consumer piece in Louisville or a business piece, and it was something that the print writer had a certain expertise in, we would go out together and we would do our story together. I would do my story for air, and I would also put it on the air for, put it on the web for print. And then the print writer, the digital writer, they would do a more in-depth piece. And they would also have these digital writers every Sunday. They would have like a featured story. And it was very cool. It gave you, a deeper dive into whatever story we were covering, whatever the big story of the day was. So I think that with digital becoming so important, so big, news directors are realizing the importance of that and how more people are accessing and reading right here on your phone. In fact, I have friends, my millennial friends, who tell me, Samantha, if you didn't post your stories on Instagram, I wouldn't know what was going on in the news. And it's like, that's so sad because I'm on TV and that's our bread and butter, but that's very indicative of the way that we are going. So I would say try to get into one of these digital departments in the newsroom. They want to hire people who can write. Don't get me wrong, I know how to write, but gosh, these digital reporters, these digital folks, they are so crafty, and there's an art to it. And there's an art to it that they've really honed in on that I think some of us broadcast folks, we haven't scratched the surface. So I would say, hey, it may even be worth checking out that Louisville station, WDRB, but I think that more stations are really picking up print folks because they understand that digital is, a lot of stations are going digital first. So I would say you definitely should be able to get some opportunities. I know it may seem hard, but digital is everything right now. In fact, I feel like I'm not doing enough digitally. So I would say the time has to be now for you to really strike gold with one of these stations. It may not seem like it, but it's there.
Okay, Laura Hediger, you were going to jump in on this too.
I would echo that. At our station, we recently redid the entire newsroom, where the entire focus is exactly what Samantha was talking about, our digital content center. Everything funnels through that first. And our motto is digital first as well. And most of the people we are hiring there are the younger people, because you guys get it. You get Instagram, you get Twitter, you get Facebook. I know that's probably old school for a lot of you, but that really is a fantastic starting point. And I have seen so many younger people start in higher markets at that digital level than you would if you started as a reporter somewhere. And I do apologize. My dog is barking at the mailman. So sorry if you're hearing barking in the background.
So I know at one point, I think I told many of you in class, and Laura, this is probably Laura M. in Milwaukee, this may be echoed with you too. It's hard sometimes for people who don't work in television to understand that those of you who are in front of the camera are like the tip of the iceberg, that there are so many more people in your newsroom that never have their faces on air who have to be there. And some of those people are doing, as Laura H. said, they're doing digital things these days. They're not only producers and associate producers, but maybe they work in a graphics department or something like that. So Laura, would you agree, Laura M., would you agree with that there are opportunities for non-TV people in a broadcast world?
100%. I mean, I'll echo it as well. We work for EW Scripts, and they are so digital first. I mean, it's they're leading the way. We have a digital MMJ, actually. We just hired that position, and he reports like solely for digital. And, those opportunities are there definitely because you do know how to write and because you are quick with social media. The other thing too, like as you go further into your career, just conversations at management level, we have an I-team reporter position open. And I know that my news director has been looking at print journalists from the Journal Sentinel who know how to dig and, know how to be investigators to try to translate that onto TV.
We
Also,
have a
producers as well would be a great opportunity for you. You get to write and you get to learn how to produce, and you may catch the bug.
We have a question from not a student. Jessica Watson is an alumna already working in TV. Jessica, go ahead and ask your question. May have to unmute there. There you go.
Okay. Hi guys, thank you so much for doing this. So I'm at a year and a half, basically starting next week. And my main question is like, what way should I go about navigating finding my next job, especially with everything that's going on right now?
I
You're at a year and a half.
Pete's ready to answer.
Yeah, so I'll give you some advice on that one because I'm actually in the job market soon as well. Yeah, the pandemic definitely. I think I don't know if this is the greatest time to be looking for a job right now, but I guess my advice to you would be identify places where you'd be willing to go that you think would advance your career, and also identify kind of what you want to be doing. I mean, do you want a job that offers some anchoring opportunities? Do you want something that's more investigative? And then once you look at stations that you think do good work, I mean, even if they don't have openings right now, never hurts to email the boss there. You know, it's pretty easy to track down a news director's email and just say, hey, you know, I admire your station's work. I came across X, Y, and Z stories that you did, and I would just love to get some feedback from you. That's like a really good way to get on someone's radar, even if there's not open positions. The other thing I would say is, you know, when you're looking for jobs too, try to think 12 steps ahead. So if you're applying at a station group and you know, like, I'm just going to use this as an example, you know, your ultimate goal is to work in New York City. It's not a bad idea to get in with a group of stations that has a station in New York City. So you think maybe, you know, if that's where I want to be, take this job, I grow in a different market. And then once something opens at the station where I really want to be, I can apply no matter where I am in my contract and make that move just because, you know, I'm kind of my foot's in the door already with the company.
Right. Laura, if I remember right, you took a road trip that wound you up in Charleston. That's one option for many students is if you can take a road trip, make appointments, go visit places. The other is to blitz a market that you really want to work in, whether that's Madison or Milwaukee, of course, a market that's appropriate for your skill levels. So I think for Jessica, if she's worked, I assume as an MMJ somewhere, and she's making that second jump, she probably can't do a road trip, but should she consider blitzing a market that she really wants to work in? What do you think, Laura?
I would say 1000% yes. When I got my opportunity in St. Louis, I was coming back to the area for a vacation. So a month before that, I contacted all 3 news directors in the St. Louis area, heard back from the Fox affiliate within the hour, offering me an interview on this very specific day. Didn't hear back from the other 2 stations. Wanted to come that day early for the interview, called the NBC affiliate. They didn't answer. Called the CBS affiliate where I now work for 8 years. They said, fine, we'll talk to you for 3 minutes. And they pretty much offered me a job on the spot because I told them I want to be in St. Louis. I will be in St. Louis. And I have an interview down the road in like 2 hours. And I've now been at Channel 4 in St. Louis for 8 years. And my bosses still tell me in that entire 8 years, I am the only person who has shown up and flat out asked for a job. And even when I vacationed in other parts of the country, I used to travel to San Diego quite a bit. I stopped in at all those stations too, and I still have dialogues with a bunch of the bosses there. Probably not going to end up there anymore, but hey, if you're ever in a certain spot and you could see yourself living there, what's it going to hurt to call or email and try to get a foot in the door?
Yeah, I have to say I'm a junkie in that way. I visited Phoenix recently to watch an Illini basketball game and connected with one of our alumni at a Phoenix TV station to get a tour, and because I'm addicted to TV. Laura Magolian, what do you think about all of this in terms of the best tactic in terms of, I've been out there a year and a half, my 2-year contract's about to come up. What's my next step?
As a producer, so I was in Rockford for about a year and a half and I knew I was done. I think if you feel like you're ready and that you feel like you've learned what you can in a small market, then you need to move on so you can just kind of push yourself. what I did in Rockford, I was fortunate enough to not have a contract, so I didn't have to worry about it. When I worked in Milwaukee the first time as a line producer at the CBS affiliate, I did have a contract, and I knew that I did not want to stay. So I just started working my network. I just networked all over the place, and I just kind of did the blitz effect. I was emailing news directors and just trying to make as many contacts as I could. And I wound up getting in touch with an EP at Fox, and that's how I got my foot in the door. And I gave myself, I would say, I started actively looking 6 months out. I really like put the foot on the gas 3 months out. And, I was determined to do it, and anything that I could do to get in touch with people, I would. And it was almost, I danced the line probably between annoying, like persistent and annoying. And I think there's a way to go about it, give your, if you're going to blitz email news directors, give them some time to respond. And then, if you don't hear anything, wait maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks, try it again. And eventually you'll get some response back.
All right, we have a question from a student. Jose, you have a question for our panel. Go ahead, unmute your mic and go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, hey guys. When I graduate from college, I've heard both ways that it's best to start in a smaller market, and that if the opportunity comes up, you should start in a bigger market. So I'm just looking to see what is the better route to take.
Samantha, you want to jump into that one? You've navigated smaller and large markets. I would say that I think one of the questions he may not be answering or may not be including in his question is, what is it you want to do? Are you in front of the camera, behind the camera? Because I think that would make a difference. But Samantha, go ahead and try to answer.
Sure. So on the broadcast side, I would say I'm so glad that, first of all, I don't think that my reel would have gotten me to Chicago straight out of college anyway, but I'm glad that I started in a small market. I started in Peoria, Illinois. I worked for WEEK. I remember when I got the call that I got the job, I talked to Ken and JP, and JP was breaking it down. And JP, remind me, you're from Peoria, right? Are you from Peoria?
Correct. I grew up, my aunt used to work at WEEK.
Right. I'm so glad that I started in a small market, because you truly get to make all of your mistakes there. I'm in Chicago now, and I feel totally comfortable on the air where all of my friends and family can watch me, but I was not that comfortable when I first started. I'll never forget my first live shot. I was in a field somewhere. We were talking about 4th of July traffic. So we were talking about 4th of July traffic and fatalities and drinking and driving. And during my first live shot, I froze. I said, fatalities are down, and so is everything else. Back to you. I froze, and my mom watched the clip, and I called her crying afterwards, and she could not stop laughing. I'm like, Mom, it's not funny. And she thought it was the funniest thing in the world. I thought I was never going back to the station. I said, everybody's going to be talking about it the next day. Of course, nobody really cared. Everybody's doing their own thing, but I thought I was done. I'm like, this is going to end up on YouTube. I have still tried to find that clip to this day. I can't find it. I would love to find it. But you don't want to make those kinds of mistakes on air in a big market. You just don't. One thing I will say, though, is, in the beginning, I was told it'll take you 10 years. It'll take you 15 years to get to Chicago. I don't agree with those timelines. I'd say start in a small market, but go on your pace, your own level. It took me a year to go from Peoria to market 40 something in Louisville. And then it took me another year to go from Louisville to Dallas, which is market 5. So I would say go on your pace, your level. But starting small, I would say across the board in broadcast is good. Make your mistakes in a smaller town where folks are more forgiving. They're used to seeing talent kind of, make their mistakes. I had a producer in Dallas who is from a small town, And he said, every time me and my wife go back to our small town and we go to our summer house, we just love seeing the young folks make mistakes. He said, it's our evening entertainment. We'll have our wine and popcorn and we'll watch the young folks and they're making all these mistakes on the news. He said, it's like comedy for us. Make your mistakes in a small town where folks kind of enjoy, expect, and embrace it. And then you'll eventually move on to a bigger market if you so choose.
Yeah. By the way, they're still talking about your mistakes in Peoria. Laura M., you're up next. You wanted to jump in on this.
Yeah, I echo that. I think small market is the place you need to start, especially as a producer. And I'm gonna, I guess, kind of contradict myself. And I do want to talk about this because producers are very hard to find. And we in Milwaukee have started an internship program and also hiring straight out of college. I'm the hiring manager at our station, and I've hired 2 producers that have been straight out of college. And I'm very excited for them, but they have a lot of challenges. You know, they're learning and they're growing, but they make a lot of mistakes, and it really messes with their confidence. I have to continuously build them up because of the mistakes that they're making. And it's not their fault. They just don't know. They're having all of their firsts. In Rockford, I had my first, we had our first blizzard, and I was on air, you know, we were on air producing 24/7, literally for hours and hours on end. You know, I got to watch the governor, Blagojevich, the Blagojevich trial. I covered that. You know, I had a lot of big stories, but in the small market it was more forgiving. And, you know, you come into Milwaukee where you have huge news, you go into Chicago where you have huge news, St. Louis. I mean, you need those growing pains, I feel like, and, you know, it'll help you become a better journalist, period, regardless if you're on air or if you're behind the scenes.
Pete, you started small market too, right? And did you make some mistakes there that helped you down the line?
Oh yeah. This stays on the Zoom meeting to everyone who's listening, but my big mistake in lacrosse was with the Bross's approval. I mean, it wasn't just my screw up, but we misreported during the 2012 presidential election that Mitt Romney was coming to town, and he was not, in fact, coming to town. It was a bus tour with some of his supporters on it, because we got a tip about it from someone, and then, you know, I reached out to a local Republican official there and said, "We heard Romney's coming. Is it true?" And he basically said the bus is going to come 6 p.m. on this day. And so I forwarded the message to my boss, and I said, "Okay, this is now the second person." We didn't really press him on like, well, who's on the bus? I mean, it's a Mitt Romney bus tour, but is he actually be on the bus? And so my boss said, "Yeah, absolutely, throw it on the air." So we did, and then we started getting calls from Republican, you know, it's the local chapter, about like, "Hey guys, Romney's not actually coming; it's his bus tour." So yeah, that was not my finest hour.
But
I would just
lesson learned.
Lesson learned for sure. And I would definitely, I mean, obviously I came up through the on-air side, but I would echo what Laura said about producers too. I mean, I'll tell you, not just because she's on this meeting, Laura's the best EP or producer I've ever worked with. So, I mean, I would, you know, for those of you who are listening who, you know, want to go that route, I would definitely listen to what she says.
We have a question from Patrick, who's watching us on YouTube. You know, many of us are staying at home or quarantined, whatever you call it that these days. He wants to know what he might be able to do as an on-camera person to practice, rehearse, because student newscasts just aren't happening. Mm-hmm. So do you take your camera in the bathroom and look in the mirror? What do you do, Laura? Laura H.
I would never take your camera in the bathroom with you. That's a bad idea. Just throwing that out there. But absolutely, you should practice. I go back to my cheerleading days where I practice everything into a mirror. And still, there are times where I practice into a mirror, and you all have smartphones just like this. There's no reason you can't, if you don't have a tripod, you can't set it up in front of a pile of books and work on stand-ups, or you could listen to the news of the day and compress that into a minute of different top stories. Work on your writing. You have time on your side, or you could probably go out and put together some pretty cool stories, even from 6 feet apart. The majority of our reporters right now are doing all of their packages through their phones, and they are able to do it still standing very far away from people. And with the technology for editing that you can get on your phone, there's no reason why you can't put together some really interesting human pieces right with the technology that you have.
Samantha, do you have a tip for this student who wants to be on camera? What can they do to practice while they're at home?
So there are some apps that are really cool that you can download on your phone, teleprompter apps. And a lot of us had these ring lights, and you can prop it right on your phone. Definitely get a ring light. I actually just ordered a ring light. It's downstairs. I'm going to set it up as soon as I get done with this.
And a ring light, a light that puts the focus on you, right? And the camera shoots
Right.
through.
So it's literally a ring of light, and then you put the phone right in the middle. And what I would do is download one of those teleprompter apps. And even if you just need to copy and paste some web copy, put it in your phone and practice going over through the teleprompter. Right now, I don't have teleprompter in the house. I'm going just straight off my phone when I go live. But yeah, try the teleprompter app. And like Laura was saying, you can put together your own pieces. Apps have made it easier than ever to edit. Even right on my MacBook, I think they have iMovie, and it's quite easy to put together a piece if you know how. You can YouTube. But David Pierce, he's a fellow Illini, and David is he's been putting together packages, and he doesn't work. He's not affiliated with any station right now. He's still in the job market, but he has been putting together pieces from 6 feet apart throughout the city. He's been still doing it, so you can make it happen. We're doing a lot of stuff on our phone, on our laptops now. All of my interviews are via Zoom. So there's really no reason why folks cannot continue to put together packages in a safe way. We've got Zoom, we've got our phones. Find an app, a program that works for you. Many of them are free, and start putting together your own pieces. You know, you can make a really good COVID-19 reel. And I think news directors are going to be really impressed when they see that you were able to go out and put together stories without any help. That's going to be really impressive. A COVID-19 reel, I think, would be huge. If I were a news director, that's what I would want to see.
I want to plant a seed for each of you as I wrap up here in the next few minutes. We do have a question coming up, but please concentrate on one thing. I want you at the end of all of this to share your most important tip with either current students or someone who's been out there 2 or 3 years and is looking for the second job hop. So concentrate on that for a minute too. Jared's on the line, and Jared has a question for us. Jared, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Relatively simple question, because I'm also trying to be on the on-air side as well. But I find that like when I'm not holding something, or I'm not like strictly in just a headshot, I kind of don't know what to do with my hands. So what do you guys do with your hands when you're not like holding something, so that you aren't just standing there?
Smiling. So we're going to go to Pete first.
Honestly, Jared, I still think about this sometimes. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to just do like as if there was no camera there and you were talking, and I would just do whatever is natural to you. I mean, I think definitely some animation in your hands, you know, it brings out the animation in your face as well. And you always, one tip that I got right away when I came to Milwaukee from people at my station was, if it feels like you have too much energy, it probably looks normal on TV. When you think like I'm energetic enough, then you watch yourself back, you think, man, I kind of like, wow, I really looked like it was 4:30 in the morning. At 4:30 in the morning, I did not look awake. But I would say just do what comes naturally to you, because at the same time, if you're on purpose, you know, moving your hands and everything to just to have something to do, it basically is going to just look awkward. The one other thing I'll say is our station has talent consultants that come through once in a while. Most stations do it. And one piece of advice I got about that was she said, if you sit back and you just kind of like, you're more open as opposed to putting your hands, clenching down on a desk in front of you or, leaning against something, it's a lot more easy to be natural than if you're, grabbing on the anchor desk or something like that.
Laura H., you want to jump in on what do you do with your hands?
You definitely need to pay attention to what the story is. When I was a hard news reporter, I covered homicides every single day. St. Louis has a lot of them. So when reporting on those, you can't be doing weird stuff with your hands that's inappropriate and distracting. But if you're at a crime scene, of course, you can reference what's going on behind you, things like that. Otherwise, if you're doing a stand-up, just be natural. If you're doing a more fun story, then tell that story the way you would to your best friend, your mom, your dad, just like I'm doing right now. I've definitely heard what Pete said, where if you feel like you are being too much, you're probably coming across pretty well. But with the hands, if you start lifting them up a lot, that could be really distracting too. So when all else fails, you can just keep them down and it'll be okay.
We have a question from Taylor. Taylor wants to know, she's about to graduate, considering graduate school to hone skills on video editing, reporting, and stuff like that. Given the job market, is grad school an option, or would you say maybe not? Laura M. up in Milwaukee, what do you think?
I would honestly, I didn't go to grad school. I mean, I was fortunate to get a job right out of school, and I feel like that's where you learn. If you go to those small markets, that experience that you get is just, it's so valuable in your career. And I wouldn't have changed that.
Okay.
I'll jump in because I did go to grad school. I stayed at Illinois and got my master's. And when I finished undergrad, it's at a very similar time that so many of you are now finishing as we enter into a recession, truly. I finished my degree in 2009. The job market was not great. I stuck around for 3 semesters to get my master's in broadcast, and I wouldn't change it for the world. JP is one of the reasons I did that. And let me tell you this, whereas medical school and law school is so incredibly expensive, there is a very, very good chance you could get your master's paid for you. I made money on my master's at the University of Illinois. I got a full ride there, did not pay a dime for it. And then I was a teaching assistant and made money every single month teaching Journalism 200. I loved it, but I wanted that in my back pocket. So whenever I decide I don't want to do on air anymore, I have that in my background where I can then teach at the college level. And that's something that's very enticing to me. If you have no desire to ever teach or do anything with your master's, then of course try to go get a job. But if you want to ride out this crazy economy for a little bit, I would at least look into it.
Yeah. Samantha, you did not go to grad school, is that correct?
No, I didn't. And it worked out for me not going because I was able to, I want to say 3 weeks after graduating, I moved to Peoria. And then maybe a couple of weeks after that, I started. So it worked out for me. And thankfully, I only have one set of student loans, which I'm very close to paying off, thank God. But yeah, it worked out. I was able to get my hands dirty right away, and I didn't go to grad school.
I would say I've been trying to help a couple of recent graduates and students. Don't go to grad school because you've got nothing else to do. I mean, have grad school have a purpose if you're going to go there, whether it's for journalism or another major. I know there are people working in journalism today who got their grad degree in library and information science or in English or in something other than journalism. That's fine. But don't go because I don't know what else to do. I'll just go to grad school. That may be what parents advise, but be careful of that. Hey, we're wrapping up here at the end, so I'm going to kind of do a roundtable here on your best tips for a current student about to graduate, or for an alum or an alumna out there who is saying, gee, I need to make the next job hop. How can they showcase themselves? What's your tip to them to make them look good? And by the way, do you think the broadcast market is a little more open than newspapers? Let me start at the bottom of the alphabet with Pete.
What? I thought I had time to think about this one. You came to me? No, I'm just kidding. I would say, yeah, I do think it seems like right now there's more jobs in broadcast. I don't really have a ton of insight as to why, but I will tell you as someone who's kind of keeping an eye on openings on LinkedIn right now, I think there's more in TV. My one tip, I honestly think your most valuable asset wherever you go as a reporter, and whether it's TV or whether it's print or whether it's digital, the on-air stuff, being more comfortable on air, that will come. The thing that people can't teach you is how to build a Rolodex and how to build contacts. And that's something that comes, when you're somewhere for longer than just 2 years, it starts to really get better. But I will tell you, the most valuable reporter in every newsroom is the person who can generate a story on a day when there's nothing in the day book and nobody has a press conference and there's nothing going on. So I would say, as soon as you get places, immerse yourself in that community. Best case scenario, you really enjoy your 2 years there. Worst case scenario, you just enjoy your 2 years there. You meet a lot of people and you move on. Best case scenario, if you like it and you end up staying, you can go basically to top reporter at that station really quick if you're the person who has contacts and you have contacts that will make themselves available.
Laura Mogollon, a lot of people would say, I only want to be on air. I'm only going to look at on-air jobs. Should they maybe change their approach and say, maybe I'll be a producer 2 days a week and work on weekends on air? What do you think?
I would say you need to do what you're passionate about, because as a recruiter, I do see a lot of people that apply and, they say they're anchor producer and they're applying for a producer job to get into a bigger market. So my first question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I see myself on air. This is a stepping stone. I want a producer that's invested. I'm not trying to knock that. I think you should be, when you're in a smaller market, if you do have an opportunity to produce, you will likely have the opportunity to produce and to be on air at the same time. You may catch that bug, but I would say be open to all opportunities. If you have an interest or you're remotely interested in producing, apply for those positions, because that you will likely get an interview. The amount of people that apply for my job openings versus, when Pete's job is posted is it's insane. I mean, there could be 150 candidates going for Pete's job, but my producing job, I have 5 people. So, I would just say, be open, but if it's not in your heart, then apply for where your passion lies. And then my tip is really just listen. Once you get in the door, try to find somebody who's been there, try to find a mentor in the station and be confident, but don't be cocky. That's where you can really impact your ability to learn and to grow. I'm fortunate, Marissa, that I was talking about earlier, she took me under her wing, and I honestly, to this day, she helped me so much to gain confidence, to build myself up, to learn the craft. And, I had a lot of attitude when I came out of college because I was, the only producer, and I felt like I was really good, and I realized I was not. And she really helped me out. So listen, because that will help you grow.
All right, thank you very much. Laura in St. Louis, your tip or way for somebody to make themselves more attractive as a job applicant or making that second job hop?
My tip, just going forward in general, is be yourself. Whenever I started in news, I felt like I had to be this super buttoned up person who was so serious, and that's not me. And I reported all through Ferguson, so I can be serious, but you still need to figure out how to do that without emulating your heroes or whoever you think your heroes are. Find out what makes you good on air or a good producer, a good storyteller, and then keep being the person you've always been. And then for getting a job, be aggressive. Don't mean to go back to my cheerleading ways, but be aggressive. And when you do get an interview or you do get your foot in the door at that television station, write a thank you. You can send an email. I would suggest writing a handwritten thank you note. I did that for all 30 TV stations that I randomly showed up at. And what's funny about it is, as some of my other panelists have mentioned, this is a small business. I have run into those people that I sent thank yous to, and they still remember that. The bosses who hired me still have my thank you note in their drawer. They've been in their careers 20 plus years, and it's like one of 5 thank you notes that they have. So those little things that you learned way back in kindergarten to say thank you will help you in this profession.
And I'll bet your grandma taught you that thank you thing.
She did.
Samantha, tip and way for somebody to make themselves stand out when they apply.
Okay, so a couple of things. tvjobs.com. I don't know if there's a more popular site out now. It's been a while for me, but I got my first 2, I won't say I got, but I found my first 2 jobs on tvjobs.com. And I would go through those postings and I would send emails. Maybe 20 emails a day. Literally, I was obsessing over getting a job during school. Any opportunity that I could to locate a job. And I found a lot of them on tvjobs.com. Now, I will say there is an annual membership. Back then it was, I want to say maybe close to $100 a year, but it worked out. So tvjobs.com was absolutely great. Secondly, I would say right now is a good time to start putting together some stories. Get on your phone, download some apps, figure out what the best and cheapest way to edit a story is, and go find some stories. You do not have to be up close and personal right now. If you know of a testing site without showing people exactly whose specific faces, be far away and show testing sites in your area. If they're giving away masks not far from your home, go ahead and do a stand-up right there. Put together a COVID-19 reel, because I truly believe that is going to separate candidates, people who are putting together stories now, because these are unprecedented times. And news directors want to see that, just like us, you can get down and dirty and turn some stories that we never thought we'd be able to turn before. And my last tip would be, I'm creating a website right now for myself. If you can, create a website. Again, I'm so huge on digital first, and there's so much more that I can do myself, because I am seeing the trend every day. Most of the people my age are not watching me on TV. They are watching me on the gram. They are watching me on Twitter. That's how people are consuming news. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a website where I have all of my social media. You can click Instagram icon. You can click and go right to my Instagram, my Twitter. Everything is just right there. A link to where you can find all of my stories on the ABC7 Chicago website. I think digital is huge. I think if you have an Instagram, make it pop, make it professional too, because some things that you might post from college don't go away. Digital is everything. Get your Instagram numbers up. Really hone into your digital platform. I think that's going to be where we are in the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's huge.
Thank you all so much for the great advice you've shared. The students, the alums, thank you. But I personally thank you so much for what you did. Someday when there is again homecoming and tailgating and coming back to campus, we hope all of you will come back. Laura, that includes you too in Milwaukee. In fact, maybe we ought to tell Laura what CAMS is all about, or perhaps that's
not the same anymore.
No, it's
not the same, but hey, we got to tell a girl how to have a happy time on campus. Thank you again very much, and we appreciate it. For those of you still watching online, We'll try to share contact information for everybody so that you can correspond with them if you want to. Thanks again. Be well out there. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, JP.
Go Illini.
Yellow. I'm getting a crew together and I need producers. You in?
Yeah, I'm in.
100% I'm in. Yeah, I'm in. One thing though, I'm already here.
Now we just need anchors.
But who?
We need TV experts.
I know just who to call.
Hello?
Hello? What are you doing this fall?
Anchoring?
Good answer.
What's in it for me?
An opportunity
Opportunity to what?
to tell stories that matter.
And if I say no?
You won't,
How do you know?
because you picked up the phone.
Good morning,